whether you should study in India or abroad. A lot of students have this question as well. And maybe you could share your experience, pros and cons from what you've experienced, of people you know, and what you've observed and heard from them. Uh, Bhasker, could you start us off?
Okay. Um, I haven't gone abroad to study, so I don't know. I have these ideas that other people have told me, so I can elaborate using them.
Yeah,
But studying in India, I think the one pro that I've found to a great degree is that you become, especially for people who are working in the clinical field, I think you become more knowledgeable of the cultural aspect of how certain uh, distresses, how certain disorders are explained to you, right? The idioms that people are using,
yeah,
you become more based on the Indian population, where maybe you're planning to work for a longer period of time.
yeah,
So that cultural basis, I think, is very important, considering if you're doing clinical psychology primarily. Uh, I think one of the cons probably is that our courses may not be as strenuous, especially in terms of research. I don't think most courses in India are great in terms of the kind of research facility that they provide. Uh, Clinical psychology wise, I think there is decent amount of information that is there with Nimans and IBAS and RML Hospital, and all of these places are very decent in terms of the kind of exposure they give MPhil students for the clinical psychology courses. But I think going abroad uh, is probably a better decision to make of the two, if I'm to be very honest, because it just exposes you to a larger way of doing research and as well as clinical work. Uh, and clinical work abroad is also not very hospital based, which it is in India. So that makes another major difference in terms of how you're functioning. Uh, the master's course in India does do one good thing, and that is that it encompasses a lot of theoretical information.
mm,
So you learn modules from biopsychology to cognitive psychology to your clinical psychology, and it's a huge extent developmental psychology, social psychology research. So there is an extreme amount of importance given to a range of subjects. So you get used to a lot of information, which is probably a good thing. So that's what I think. It's probably, if you have to choose between the two, and if you have a choice, you go abroad. That's what I tell my students all the time. Um, but staying back in India is not a bad thing. At the end of the day, it boils down to how you work on the kind of space that you find yourself in. If you're not willing to work, then you might go abroad or be in India, and you're not going to get anywhere anyway. So it boils down to that as well. If it's your own self motivation, right? So the courses can only push you to that much degree. So that's what I think.
so so you're a big promoter of perseverance again.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And Rashmi, what would, like, is there a different perspective, or do you agree with Bhaskar's views, or what do you think?
Well, I would say that my perspective is a bit different. Maybe, I don't know, I was lucky or something, because from where I did my, as I said, that my whole education I did it from India.
Yeah,
And I did my master's and PhD in cognitive science from Allahabad University, and that center is quite good. So, and the exposure was very good, there. So I have no regret that I did my whole education and or master's or PhD from India.
yeah,
Uh, Maybe the kind of exposure I got there, maybe because of that. But definitely, it depends, because in India also, if you see, there are a lot of new centers now. It's opening. Like, for example, if you go to IIT Gandhinagar, IIT Kanpur also,
yeah,
they have started recently this Center for Cognitive Sciences there,
yeah,
and you go to University of Hyderabad. So if you look for, in the website, if you search, you will definitely get a very good institute and good university in India also. And the syllabus is quite good. So you can definitely compete, internationally also. And
sure.
the professors are also very good in India, and many people are coming back to India, and they are developing their lab. So in that way, I would say that India is also not a bad option.
Yeah,
Uh, Other thing is, I would like to say that the beauty about the studying in abroad is that, because I never studied there, but I was enrolled in one of the subject there. The masters, there was a master program there, and I just did one course that is in cognitive neuroscience. So what I have seen, the difference between the way they teach is that every week you will get a lot of assignment.
Mm.
Okay, but in India it's more theoretical based. Okay, but there it's like a lot of assignments they give you, so it's in that way you will learn a lot. But the disadvantage is that you will feel a lot of pressure also at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so depend how you're going to cope up with. But India also, slowly people now, I mean, they have also started incorporating those practicals also, as I said, this research based techniques and project based methods they have started incorporating in their teaching. So I think I would say India is also not a bad options if they look for good institute and good university. There are a lot of scopes here also, I would say.
Sure. Okay, great. And it's great to hear that from both of you, because both of you have a basis and a background and foundation here in India itself. But you have different perspectives, and I think Rashmi has also been outside and come back to India. But it's great to know these different views. Kohinoor, what do you think? What is your experience? You've also studied in India. You've also been outside. What do you feel?
Yeah, I think as both of them mentioned, I think not all universities have the same kind of approach. And
Yeah.
my personal experience has been that definitely abroad, there's a lot of emphasis on research, but we also, or like we as in most of us tend to have this bias that everything outside is great, but that's not true. So there are bad universities in the UK, there are bad universities in the US, and everywhere in the world essentially. So it's not like India is full of bad universities and everywhere outside is great. I would say otherwise. I would say India has some really good institutions that are doing some really stellar work. And as Rashmi mentioned, a lot of people are coming back to the country as well. So there's a lot of knowledge coming in. There's a lot of knowledge going out. I think that sharing is great. And especially now, since we're in these pandemic times, I think like we're all coming together online as well. So even if you are in India, as Bhasker said, you're all what matters is essentially how you make use of what situation you're in. I think being in India, being a researcher in India or a student in India, you can still access to other things that are outside, whether it be online, whether it be through lab visits, whether it be through collaborations. And
Yeah.
it's the same being outside. So as someone who's working outside, so as a postdoc in Glasgow and Sydney, I've been trying to work in India. I've been trying to have collaborations in India. I think that kind of knowledge transfer is essential and it's important. So I would support both of their points, but say it matters, but it also doesn't matter where you do your education. I think what matters is your ability or your willingness to learn. So that's my point of view, I guess.
Okay, so I think the only thing that I would like to add to this is a little bit about integrating within the system. So taking off from what Bhaskar said about cultural references and being trained where you practice, I think that's a huge, it's a very important thing. So if you see yourself coming back to India and working here, I think it's a little bit easier if you also studied here, because it's given you that much extra time to network and grow your roots in the country with your peers, with your colleagues, or even your seniors. To a certain extent, because psychology has been recognized and funded for a longer period, possibly the funding again that goes back into teaching psychology is probably higher outside of India. And I think this is why a lot of people think it's better to go outside. But I guess again, like Rashmi said, and I think Bhaskar said this as well, that you receive a 360 of psychology, so you don't have to focus on just one particular topic, while which is what happens when you are studying outside of India. So I think, yeah, it really boils down to, I think I'd also just, the thing I wanted to add was, think about where you see yourself after your program. And if it is possible for you to study in the same place, then that gives you a bit of an advantage, because the core knowledge base of psychology is the same, whether you learn it from India or you learn it from abroad. And of course, there's more the teaching methodology that makes a difference. Yeah. Okay.
I'd just like to jump in one
Yeah.
thing. what my supervisors have told me and other lecturers and people in academia have told me, which has been really important, is to keep your options open. So it doesn't like matter where you do what, but just keep your options open. Don't think like you don't have to make all decisions before you go into a psychology program, before you do your bachelor's or your master's. You don't have to think about where am I going to be 10 years from now. But I think it's helpful to think about what are the options, what are the things that I'd like to do 10 years from now. If there are multiple things, how can I do something today that helps me achieve most of those goals?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's good advice.